and introduce you to the guys here. So again, the guys just thinking through some of the things that might be gaps or areas to share insights with you all as IT leaders that are pretty common, and just share some insights, hopefully bring value to you. With that, I want to introduce you to Trent Giddings, Saul Oging, and Will Clem from our team. So guys, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing with the team. I will get out of your hair and turn it over to you guys.
Dana, thank you for the introductions. I appreciate that. Like you said, I am Trent Giddings. I'm the core manager over our managed services team. I'd like to just hop right into it and really get started, make the best use of our time. Thank you for everyone. Thank you to everyone for joining us today as we discuss ways of closing the largest IT gaps. Those biggest IT gaps in our industry are some of the ones that are going to be the most common, costly, and those big weak points that are really going to hamstring our industry or our business if we're not prepared and thinking about things from the future perspective. Today, we'll cover items such as the lifecycle management of our assets and our solutions, patching from our OSs to critical pieces of our infrastructure, strategic views and strategic focus ahead with automation, proper backup testing, and preparation for rainy days like when a disaster hits and you need to activate a DR plan. Our main goal for today is to educate everyone here so that we're all prepared for the modern IT world that we live in. As we look forward at our technologies that we have, one of the biggest pieces that we need to consider is proper lifecycle management. That's going to be from the moment we onboard a user, device, solution, new product, new line of business. How do we make sure that we're deploying something that's consistent, that was properly designed, and that isn't going to need a lot of manual oversight to keep that new item alive and thriving? Once that item's onboarded within that lifecycle process, you're really going to start to see some of that value as you're deploying it out, and you want to focus on consistent deployments so that your end users are, properly deployed, that their solution stacks that you've invested in are consistently available. And some of that consistency is going to rely on maintenance. A large part of that process is going to be making sure that we're staying up to date on our vulnerabilities. We're staying up to date on monthly patches. We're making sure that we're in good relationship with best practices from our vendors and staying consistent so that whatever new items there are, we're never considering those a resource drain, and we're never falling through those grates with our products and losing sight of making sure that our investments are properly secured. Once we're solid in that life cycle process from a maintenance perspective, we have to look at how do we grow this? How do we make sure that things are upgraded, that we're making sure that we're properly designed to manage disasters, that those products can be available throughout the entire life cycle up until its retirement. We all know that we have to sunset things at some point. We have vendors that have requirements that, like Dana said, we've got Windows 11 deployments that have to go out. These are super important things that have to be available for our end users. That means sunsetting our Windows 10. At this point in our entire modern IT infrastructure, we're looking at the past to see where all of those devices are, making sure that we're looking ahead to see, do we need them? What's the cost? How do we make sure that we're properly securing what we need and we're not playing catch up in the last mile? For IT leaders, a lot of that burden of the routine infrastructure work, the tasks that take away from the critical business components, those things that actually drive revenue, increase profit, all of those distractions from the routine infrastructure work really take a toll, especially as our product stacks continue to grow. Those requirements for best practices for proper maintenance and securing upgrades become more and more complex as the days go longer. And so some of that fatigue will eventually inhibit, that will eventually enable burnout all around. So one of the main things that we want to focus is how do we be proactive instead of thinking about things in a traditional mindset, right? We're in a part of the world that we're decades ahead from where we were decades ago. Uh, we're looking at transforming that traditional mindset to something that is a much more proactive, automated, and efficient process, something that's secured and consistent. I think that's going to be one of the themes for today is minimizing things that, um, you know, bring us more heartache, minimizing some of those inefficiencies that allow us to, that force us to spend more manual time in processes. Those automated life cycle items can sprawl from patching of our OSs, quick deployments from firewalls or other devices, um, hypervisor upgrades, right? So we want to make sure that we're thinking not just about checking the box, but how do we make sure that that box is secured, automated, and properly designed so that you're efficient in your day to day. The main goal at the end of the day is focusing on reducing our risk. We can't eliminate it. The main goal has to be to focus on lowering it as much as possible, becoming comfortable with our risk, saving money. At the end of the day, we're a business. Everybody has to be focused on increasing our profitability, making sure that we're more resilient in our infrastructure, and minimizing any forms of waste in our industries. So all of that has to come with a strategic focus on how do we propel ourselves to the next stage of our modern IT infrastructure. Gaining that peace of mind is critical. Gaining that ability to be a little bit more agile, be a little bit more resilient. All of that adds to the cost savings. All of that greatly reduces the risk and allows us to have a peace of mind and sleep a little bit easier while we continue to grow our businesses in the most critical ways. Now that we've kind of touched base on what the important pieces from a life cycle process are, one of those key functions is patching. Patch management is paramount to our success. As we all know, ransomware will run rampant without proper security measures being taken. Some of those is staying up to date with best practices, with patching, making sure that the patching is properly deployed, is consistently tested, and any form of actions from a remediation process are taken swiftly and efficiently. As a result, some of these devices that become that fall outside of that and slip through the grates, those unmanaged, unpatched laptops, PCs, devices, whatever they may be, those expose our business to unforeseen risk, unexpected and unnecessary risk that all it takes is to be consistent and reliable with our efforts. And to speak a little bit more about that, I wanted to talk to Saul a little bit more about security. Saul?
Thanks, Trent. Thanks, guys, for having me here. Saul here, the security engineer for Choice, and yeah, a lot of the responsibility falls under patch management for myself and the team. And I want to just jump right into it. Just like the slide shows, 60% of breaches involved unpatched vulnerabilities. And quite frankly, a lot of them are not zero-day vulnerabilities. These are vulnerabilities that have been sitting out in the wild and have, been unmanaged or overlooked. And I think a lot of it has to do with what Trent mentioned earlier is the traditional approach with IT. As we scale in to more of a modern IT approach with automation and even AI in the mix, we can we can start to look at patching as an afterthought and insecurity from experience. Um, Pushing it to later date is usually too late. We don't want to be notified that you know, a vulnerability is impacting our business because we forgot to patch, right? And unpatched, like the previous slide, I don't know if you guys caught that, says unpatched, unprepared, and unprotected. And that's usually the gap that attackers live for, is they're looking for any type of flaw or any type of entry point into your environment. And they're constantly scanning, the internet or scanning the network to see what way can they find a way into the environment, unfortunately. And it's the world that we live in. And it's not getting any easier if we're not maintaining our systems. The important thing to also remember is that, as I mentioned before, it's not all about 0 days, though they do drop vulnerabilities saying, hey, 0 day has just dropped. We have to make sure we act urgently. I think it's more of a strategic approach when it comes to patching. We have to kind of standardize what we're looking at. And a lot of it, it involves asset management, asset inventory, going back to the life cycle management in IT, gathering the actual assets in their environment and categorizing them based on either the criticality or the actual level of impact it would take for our business to bring another machine up. We're looking at workloads that are internet facing, right? We want to categorize these and prioritize these because those systems, like I said, they're internet facing, so we're in a constant race against 8 billion people in the world versus the internal stuff that we have inside. And we don't want to take that chance. So, kind of circling back to a lot of the asset inventory and the categorization, once we have a good visibility of what we have inside of our environment, we can start to classify each system based on its use case, right? And then we can start prioritizing into our business on what can we bring up or what can we afford to prioritize first. And that comes with the criticality of the patches as well, right? We see some critical patches being deployed, some security patches being deployed. Some of them have a little bit more of a severity or more of an impact versus others. And that's where we have to ensure that we have visibility over every asset, whether it's a piece of hardware, operating system, or some type of software that we're using. These are all surface attack surfaces, I would say, for threat actors to use a way or another entryway into our environment. And with asset inventory in mind, right, we have the ability to now maintain and kind of prepare ourselves to know, hey, we might have an operating system that's coming end of life, or what version are we running of this certain software. We might need to make sure that we update to the latest software or look at another product to make sure that we're maintaining and operating at a consistent level. And another thing or another component we want to bring into is automating where possible. We have this vision of automation being some sort of magic scripting tool that we use, but a lot of the time it's tools that can automate some of the processes for us, standardizing the patching. And that comes with a lot of the components that I mentioned before is knowing what we have and then also understanding when can we afford to patch, right? When can we afford to apply these patches in a consistent basis and also scheduling the time to do that. So once we have all those things in mind and we can start to build a plan and standardize this process, we might have some ability to automate that process, reducing the error of anything going wrong or maybe miscalculating a patch. And if we can test the patch if possible, then even better, right? But now we're not really being reactive to this instance, we're being proactive. So that way these patches are consistently deployed across the environment. We're maintaining the latest operating system. We're maintaining the latest software version that they have available. And on top of that, just making sure we're remaining resilient and compliant across the board. because standardization builds resilience and consistency, right? With the automation making it more efficient. Reporting is a big factor as well, and reporting can be a compilation of, validating that the patches were actually installed and applied in a sensible fashion, but then also some proof or evidence, excuse me, to make sure that we have some documentation to report to our executive team members or perhaps some auditors, because in IT we will get audited and we have to validate that we are maintaining some sort of compliance to even be able to open up a business or maintain a business or even create new business partners. These are requirements that will take our business to the next level, but also protect our business and our reputation. So, patching is not necessarily just a hygiene or a technical hygiene. It's a business enabler for for the whole environment and for your partners as well. So hopefully we can flip the actual mindset that we have now and not necessarily think in a reactive sense, but think in a more proactive sense to ensure that we can automate some of these processes. And if not, making sure we have some type of standardization that we can continue on moving forward. And kind of to wrap things up is the initial slide said uh, to be, I believe, unpatched, unprotected, or unprepared. We want to make sure that we get patched so that way we can be prepared and stay protected. And that is probably the most cost effective, which for a business is probably the most important thing. It's the easiest and most, I guess, the less risky way to um, secure your environment is through patching. And there's many, stories out there about these type of scenarios when a patch is available and uh, a certain business or a certain industry might not patch in time for months, and unfortunately, they get they get impacted by that vulnerability. I mean, for one instance, WannaCry was one of those examples that impacted not just nationally but global scale, right? It impacted hospitals, government agencies, small, medium, large enterprises. This was a patch that was available for months, and unfortunately, those victims were falling behind, and we don't want to be that. We want to illustrate how to be proactive by making sure we can maintain some consistent and some standardization when it comes to patching. So, that's pretty much all I got. I would keep going on, but I don't want to take too much time. I'll pass it on to Will if he has anything to add to that.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Will Clem. I'm the customer success manager at Choice. And compared to these guys, I'm actually the new guy, coming up on 5 years at Choice Solutions. But before that, I spent a decade in the fire service as a firefighter paramedic here in the Kansas City area. And so a lot of my foundational experience comes from routine training, repetitive skill practice. And so I liken that to a lot of the processes that we do here at Choice Solutions. We want to train like it's the real deal, make sure that in the middle of the night, we can repeat the same action the same way that we can in the middle of the day, and that everything's written down so that everybody knows what to do when something does go wrong. Like Saul was saying, specifically with patching, it's the simplest and most effective security investment that a business can make. Most major breaches in the last decade started with an unpatched system. They left the door unlocked. And if you think about patching as the locks on your doors and windows, it brings it into perspective for me. And so, you might have the most advanced alarm system, you might have the most advanced endpoint protection system, but if you leave a window open, they're just going to get in through the window. And for the executive level, it's about risk reduction, and your brand is on the line, your reputation's on the line. You could be fined, if there is a security breach, and so it just ensures that your company doesn't end up in the headlines for the wrong reasons. And with our managed services, patching, it's not something that's reactive or inconsistent. We take an inventory every time that we onboard a client. We know exactly what's in the environment. We have agents on every single system, and then they're all patched. It becomes a disciplined process, and it becomes something that we can measure and show that the entire organization is protected. And that's one of the major advantages with our managed services offering, is that we can do it the same way every single time. We can show that we do it the same way every single time. And it takes that burden off of an internal IT team. All right, Trent, back to you.
Okay. As we kind of move forward and start discussing some of those ways to modernize and optimize our infrastructure, and to kind of stay consistent with what Saul and Will are saying, automation and is fundamental when we start to look at how do we properly deploy without overhead. Saul, can you kind of get a little bit more into that automation perspective?
Absolutely. Yeah, so a lot like what you said, it's more of a fundamental. It's no longer nice to have. We're in the era where we can have AI and other mechanisms to provide a lot of the automation for us. It's built into a lot of the systems. So for me, it's becoming the backbone of modern IT management. Across the industry, it's considered somewhat of a best practice because it does reduce the risk at a quicker rate. It keeps teams more focused on higher value work. And you don't longer have to feel like we're working in the industrial age where things are kind of being ran hand by, factory hand by hand. And you'll get the job done, you'll get some results, but more than likely there's some error to slip through the cracks. Again, it's quite exhausting. So we don't want to do the same task more than once. We can always automate it, right? And that's something that I've actually learned a lot here in our managed services is taking the mindset of if we can do it more than once and we can also teach it, then why not teach a system to do it more than once for us and automate it in a routine level? It just makes things move faster, stay consistent, like Will said, and just scale with confidence. And that's where the efficiency comes to play is like patching we just discussed. Again, I don't want to get too touchy with patching, but it's something I deal with all the time, but I think I can relate with the most is if I had to patch every single machine manually every month, I don't think I would be here having this webinar, to be honest. It'd be too exhausting. But routine tasks like patching or account setups, right? It can be an onboarding of a new employee. Those things can manually take hours, but we can make those happen in minutes, right? We can have some sort of scheduled task or some scheduled routine where it's running in the background because we've already given it the commands to do the job for us. And then from the business perspective, as the environment grows, the automation also ensures that we don't collapse under the complexity or the overhead that we might have, the overhead that we might have on staff. The scalability or more of that, I meant to say more consistency across the board, as well as it removes um, the aspect of more human error, was what I noticed. It's the same steps being ran across reliably every single time. And the automated workflows as well can make sure that we stay in line when we're, creating some type of report or some type of audit trail. It's kind of a default setting that we can run with. Again, I'll mention security and compliance because I just love security so much. Automated updates, right? It's beautiful. It's beautiful to see that, you don't have to worry about your OS system, your Office apps, your browsers, all of these components, all of these attack surfaces falling behind on patching. And one of the slides here that is shown is illustrating a pipeline of automation covering from the turning on of actual virtual machine to applying Windows patching to updating the Office apps and then updating all the browsers and then even turning off the machine for us and then creating a snapshot of some sort of copy to push out to our environment. Now, this is all usually done by an internal IT staff, hand by hand or an IT team, which can take hours. But with this automation workflow, this simple example, it no longer requires that overhead. It's a click of a button. And that's a lot of the things that we try to implement here is, can we make this happen with a click of a button? Yes, we can. And this is an illustration of that. And it's a little blurry to see, but those little pipelines there, those tiles there show what each job is doing and what's it's set to perform. And that's how we can break those things down. And that also, ties back to life cycle management, patching cycle and making sure we have good asset inventory in line. I think we discussed a little bit of disaster recovery a little bit as well as the automation. If we have some automated process to deploy or bring up a virtual machine, a critical piece of our infrastructure within minutes versus having to have a whole team or a whole set of staff to get these components together, that's where automation can change the game for us when it comes to data recovery or data resiliency, right? There's so many efforts when it comes to automation that I can exemplify from a day-to-day operations, from onboarding. I can go into new hire gets onboarded and we want to make sure that they're provisioned with the right user permissions and not over provisioned. Well, that all can be scaled to a way where we can implement some automation when the new hire gets onboarded. And no longer do we have to worry about making sure that they can access certain applications or, making sure that they can get through the actual physical building at their headquarters, right? Everything's already automated and set up for them. It just makes things a lot easier. Again, a lot of less work for your internal IT staff to have to maintain. And it's really just the future. We're living in it now. Why not just hop on the board and just make sure that we start to adopt the mindset of using automation in conjunction, if you want to throw AI in there, because it just makes life a lot easier to automate some of these tasks. It's it's the leverage that we can take into consideration for the business and for the technical team as well. Because at the end of the day, we want our technical team to adopt new skill sets, not necessarily become stale. We want them to learn new products. We want them to be a little bit more versatile, not just be stuck on one certain skill set, but scale out and range out even more, right? So, how do we start building automation? You're probably wondering, where do I start? I mean, you can kind of take the idea of just identifying some of the top repetitive tasks that kind of drain time that you have to do. And you start small. You start small with those ideas that you have to do every day, and then automate one process at a time, right? And then you track your time on the time you invested versus the time you saved, right? And then you standardize that workflow. And then you start to get into the business level of, well, what's my ROI, right? What's my return of investment in this? How do I reduce the downtime? Okay, I've reduced downtime. I've got fewer tickets. I got faster onboarding. How do I validate this and show this to the business so that way we can adopt this in another department or in another environment, right? And then it just expands from there exponentially. So to me, I don't think automation is more of a tech trend. Um, it's more of a foundation, absolutely, for just running a smarter and IT business, scaling the business operations, and then just freeing a lot more of your IT teams from that repetitive, mundane task that they have to do that I'm sure they look forward to doing every single day. But but yeah, and I know that from experience. So I think again, these are another automation patching. They chose the wrong person to talk about these things. So I can keep going all day. So I'll kind of leave it at that and let Will kind of cover if anything that I missed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to just share some recent examples of some automation that we've built for our managed services customers. Our all of our managed services customers are, um, you know, directly partnered with a systems engineer. They have access to our security, our networking team, and our automation team that we have internally. And we've identified different areas that can be automated and taken off of either our plate or internal IT team's plates. And some examples of that would be um, onboarding of new devices using tools like Intune and Autopilot to build up specific policies so that as soon as a user logs in, all of their applications that they're needed every single day are installed and provisioned, and their access is granted at the appropriate time. We just recently finished up a project where we can delegate calendars in Outlook to users' direct supervisors so that they can see, and that runs, every single month. And so every time that a new employee comes on, they don't have to worry about repeating that same process. Internally, we've used it to automate our onboarding for a new employee. So their user accounts are provisioned, their access is granted, their access into all of our internal systems like Slack and everything like that are automatically done, instead of taking somebody several hours to manually go in and create every single account, and sometimes forgetting some. And so we've been able to streamline those processes and save significant amounts of time for not only our users, but also our managed IT teams. And, it's automation for us is, we view it as kind of like cruise control. It's not that it's taking jobs away, it's that it takes away the mundane, repeatable tasks that our team or your team would have to do every single day. We're still steering, we're still in control, but the automation handles that repetitive work. And then all of our managed services customers can benefit from that, because it creates scalability, and our customers can expand their operations without having to worry about doubling their IT spend. If you grow, that's amazing, but if your costs for IT grow in lockstep with that, it's not sustainable. And so that's where we can directly benefit any of our managed services customers.
Thank you, Will. Just to kind of move things forward for the next common gap that I want to make sure that we identify so we can work on closing those across our industries is going to be the backup gap, right? We have processes and procedures to make sure that we are running as optimal as possible, that our end users are working on a consistent day-to-day. However, one of the things that we want to make sure is we're taking proper backups, that we identify our RPO and our RTO. What that really means is making sure that we've got a good recovery point objective and a good recovery time objective. To take a step back a little bit, when we're looking at backups, it's easy to get lost in a checkbox. Do I have them? Yes or no? There's a lot of things to consider outside of, did I check the box? When we're looking at backups, we need to focus in on our lines of business and the solution stack that enables that. Each line of business should have its own identified RPO and RTO. How long can I go with this particular stack being down? How impactful is that going to be to, my revenue at the end of the month? How critical is this piece of information, and how fast do I need it to be available when something goes wrong? We have different machines from file servers that you'd want something, a backup every hour. Janice in accounting lost something that was super important and she needs it back. It's end of the month. We need it critical. It's a very important piece of our information. It might be something that's done once a month, but that once a month thing is a business enabler or disabler. We're looking at things from a deeper perspective, not just checking the box, but more so, how do I validate my workers can work with the production stack that they need? How long can they be down without impacting our revenue? How fast do I need them to be up? What pieces of data do I need where? It's a chess game, not just a checkbox. There's so many things that go into a proper backup process, more so than just saying this should be backed up once a day. We need to identify each line of business and the solutions that enable that so that we can minimize the amount of loss, minimize the amount of risk, and identify just how long and just how much time I need to properly move forward while going through a bumpy road. We can't prevent risk. It's impossible. But the most important thing is to identify it, be comfortable with it, and know your way around it. Anytime we lose a critical piece of our information, that is a loss of money, right? That we're no longer able to provide the service that we've committed to. That could be an internal service, right? No one, Active Directory is down and my people can't work. How long is it going to take to get my infrastructure back up? This could be something external facing for, a banking app or whatever it may be that the world relies on. How do I provide consistent and reliable backups for when those emergencies or those bumpy roads hit? It's inevitable. There will always be something to protect. And at the end of the day, we need to narrow those RPOs and RTOs down to those specific lines of business and not just checking the box to say my company has backups. There's a lot there. And once you start to dive under the covers of that, you'll start to realize I want more. My users need their data faster. My environment can't sustain a 24-hour downtime. That critical piece of profitable infrastructure has to have, be up within the hour. I need to recover data within the last 15 minutes. Identifying those things, diving in deeper into those RPOs and RTOs to make sure that when disaster hits, we're properly covered is paramount. Making sure that our backups are the way that we need them to be allows us to move forward in that next step so that we can provide a sense of disaster recovery for the organization. Accidents happen, mistakes happen. The world that we live in is changing rapidly. We never know what piece of infrastructure might be going through a, environmental hazard. Hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, we can't predict that. But you can get comfortable with what to do when those disasters do hit. Practice makes perfect. I come from an old school traditional Jamaican mom. I practice. These are key things to make sure that when a rainy day hits, you have an umbrella and you know how to use it. And not just you, but the entire team is comfortable. Being comfortable with your risk and understanding how to maneuver through those fires is critical. And every piece and every member of the IT team has to be comfortable with that. The worst thing that you can do is fear the fear. To kind of go a little further into those backups and some of that comfortability, as we're looking into proper architecture from a backup perspective, one of the key pieces that we have to have is an immutable backup, something that once that snapshot, that backup process is completed, it's hard-coded and sealed. There's no infiltration from bad actors, changes and deletions from manual intervention. Like it says, human error. I think we all know that's probably one of our biggest problems. Overall, we can secure and make sure that all our boxes are checked, but if we're not protecting ourselves from ourselves, we will have a problem. So making sure that we're having immutable backups is a very important piece of designing a overall backup and disaster recovery infrastructure. So to kind of circle back, you want to make sure that your backups are immutable so that once they are taken, they're protected and they're solid. You're confident in your recovery. You want to make sure that your processes are automated and tested, that your confidence within your IT staff, your IT managers, and your overall IT leadership is familiar with how to handle those potentially business impacting moments, those moments that, do cause downtime, that are potential impacts to your reputation, that they are practiced, that they are ready and comfortable with ways to perform those actions the way that you need them to be done. Saul alluded before around compliance. We all have levels of compliance that we have to adhere to. We all have audits that have to be done. One of the most important things when it comes to an audit is, what do you do when something goes wrong? What's your plan? Where are your details? What's the process? Is it written? Is it tested? Is it validated? Those are the key items that have to be there just from a backup perspective overall. So to kind of move things a little forward, when we're looking at things in a business perspective and how those lines of RPO and RTO those business lines that produce profit for an RTO and RPO perspective are identified, our overall business is protected from a disaster recovery perspective. Our engineers and overall IT staff is prepared and practiced, monthly, quarterly, yearly, for whatever exercises need to be done. So your processes are known like the back of your hand. As we take things to the next level, Will, can you kind of give a little bit more around how that impacts the business?
Yeah, absolutely. I view backups as a fire extinguisher. You got to have them. And you can't fight a fire, figuratively or metaphorically, without one. And in my previous job, interestingly enough, every single fire that I ever went to, there was a fire extinguisher. But the majority of the time, people didn't know how to use it. And that's where the planning and the testing of a disaster recovery exercise kind of comes in. So yes, we have the fire extinguisher, but do we know how to use it? Have we done a fire drill? And it's not enough to just have an extinguisher anymore. You need to know how it works, and everybody needs to know how it works. In my house, I've got a fire extinguisher. It's in the kitchen. It's under the sink. My kids don't know how to use it. That's shame on me. My kids don't know how to use it. My wife knows where it is, but I don't think she's ever used one. And so going through and training and practicing through a disaster recovery exercise is what allows your organization to understand gaps, understand risk, and be able to respond appropriately. Trent, you talked about RPO and RTO. The recovery point objective, how much data can you afford to lose? And every single line of business has a different amount. Things that have load changes, we don't need a backup every single hour. If we're not changing users regularly, we probably don't need to back up the Active Directory server, but once a day. But if you've got a SQL server that's handling transactions, sales, or sales leads, you want that data very up to date. You need that backed up maybe every 15 minutes. And so that's the question that an executive team, not just the IT executives, it's got to be finance, HR, operations. They all need to weigh in to determine how much risk is appropriate, how much data can we afford to lose in this specific line of business. And then the recovery time, again, it's something that we don't know until we test it. And if we don't go through a disaster recovery exercise where we recover every single line of business, we don't know how long it's going to take. That file server that's 6 terabytes might take 2 or 3 days if you don't have the backup on site. If it's only offsite, it might take 2 or 3 days to bring 6 terabytes down across a 1 gig connection. And so we need to know that, and we need to be able to measure it, and then we need to be able to repeat it. They're business decisions across all of the organization. And then that regular validation, it gives not only the executive team, but also the IT team, the finance team, the HR team, that all gives them confidence that when a disruption occurs, whether it is a cyber attack, hardware failure, you lose a hard drive, you lose a RAID array, a natural disaster. We live in the Midwest. There's always going to be severe weather. We know that the business can recover quickly. We can maintain our trust, your trust, and your customers' trust. And we know that that resilience then allows your business to remain operational through difficult times, through cyber attacks, through disasters, uh, and that in turns into a competitive advantage.
No, thank you, Will. And kind of as we move forward into bringing things full circle, want to talk about education and what can we do today. Saul, can you give us a little bit more around our next steps?
Of course. Yeah, so just kind of like the slide shows here, first bullet is know your IT life cycle, right? And that just circles back to the first slide, making sure we have our asset inventory and we can track those assets from onboarding to retirement, right? If you don't know where your servers are or what software you're running in your infrastructure, the endpoints, all of these things play a big role when it comes to knowing and understanding your landscape. If you don't have good visibility of those, then you'll more than likely miss patches. You'll might even run into licensing issues, and even worse, you might even risk the fact that you have some end of support or end of life operating systems in your environment. All of these go back to what Will mentioned, leaving that door open, right? So we want to reduce that risk. We want to reduce that exposure as much as possible. And the best way to do that is just by assessing what your actual environment, guarding your house by walking around your house and looking for any holes or any type of gaps that you weren't aware about when you first purchased the house. That's just the easiest way to kind of visualize your environment is it is your home. It is the place where your assets and your more valuable goods are in, and we have to keep those protected. Second bullet says to make sure we audit our patch status. Well, how do we do that? Again, back to the first slide. I think everything's going to go back to the life cycle management of things, right? We have to make sure that we have some validation, right? And it's not just Windows updates. I mentioned software, right? Firmware, hypervisors, third-party apps. The attackers do not care if it's an outdated driver or an old VPN software. If it's unpatched, it's a target. And they have tools publicly available on the internet that will show them where these landmarks are and where to attack from. And again, AI will let them even know if they prompt it the right way on how to, proactively or hypothetically attack this surface. The third bullet, inactive proactive security. I think for this, it's going from the reactive mindset to more of a proactive mindset. And we don't have to necessarily think of automating or uh, enforcing security with automation by scripting everything, right? We can look at automating alerts, right? Implementing multi-factor authentication across the board in an automated fashion, right? Making sure that as soon as the user is onboarded, they're prompted for multi-factor. We're not waiting till, it's too late, 2 months past the line, and we have some alerts saying that, the compromised user did not have MFA. I mean, it's happened before. It's pretty common. So automating that process will allow us to harden and know what we can um, protect ourselves from the outside. Tightening firewall rules, might have some automation in there as well to know that if this firewall rule has just never been touched, there's never been any traffic going through it, it's probably not needed to be open, right? It doesn't need to be used. And then security, again, shouldn't have to wait for an incident or an event. We should be there to just prevent one. And that's that proactive mindset. Validate your backups, right? A backup is only as good as your ability to restore it. We can all say we have backups, we have this, but if we've never practiced um, the actual implementation of going through a whole data recovery, then how do we know when it actually happens, we're ready for it, right? And that's just constant training, as my team members just mentioned. Having to perform that successfully gives us that flexibility, but also that relaxed mindset that we don't have to worry if there's something that might happen, happens. Um, One of the quotes that says is not if it happens, is when it happens, right? It's usually something that I kind of go by being in security is it's not if, it's when, because That's what we're racing against is threat actors all the time. And then the RPO and the RTO, defining that. These are not just buzzwords, recovery point objective and recovery time objective. They're business promises, right? These are some of these lifesavers, right? This is the thing that we would be able to align with our goals and our business values to make sure that we can have something planned and set on what we can afford and what we can tolerate for the business. So having that in mind, along with documenting and sharing this IT knowledge across the team is a huge factor because you don't want to be the only person to know all of these bullets. Again, that's a centralized point of failure. And in IT, that's just a bad practice, right? So you want to spread this culture amongst all your team members from the technical to the executive level. That way, if someone is to leave, well, we have some redundancy there. We don't have to worry about the impact being something that we're worried about. So documenting processes, documenting policies, so that anyone can step in and assist upon hire or upon the change of their position. So this is as much as I can probably share with more of these bullet points to kind of stay disciplined. But yeah, again, I'll leave the floor open for Trent or Will if they have to add anything I missed. But I think that's what I can take from this.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Saul. Um, Will, can you give us a little bit more around what we can do from next steps from a business perspective?
Yeah, in my role, I get the opportunity to meet with every single one of our managed services clients on a pretty regular basis. And, the biggest things that they share with me about how our services have impacted their organizations is, we're dependable, our actions are repeatable, and we can provide the assessments to prove that that they're protected, that they're patched, that their backups are assessed and validated, and that we have a good, clear visibility into each organization, and have those metrics available so that they can take them to the rest of the organization to show exactly what we do, exactly what they do, and exactly how we can move forward in the future. And I think that that's probably the most important thing, just bringing all of that data and all of our experience into an organization to come alongside an existing IT team and help augment and strengthen it to grow into the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Saul.
Well, great. Well, Trent, Saul, Will, thank you guys so much for kind of sharing today. Again, this is kind of a look inside, if you will, just the team and leaders within our managed services operations. If we were in service to your organization. So, if it's something you're thinking about, just share some information in the survey. We can have a conversation. Obviously, want to see if it's a good fit. Again, it can start in layers. It can start in, hey, we got this gap within our IT operations right now, or maybe it's a bigger picture thing and working and developing a partnership together. So it's all about bringing value back to you. It's all about helping you guys be successful in the future. We appreciate you guys sharing just on some of the essential items that you're seeing that can bring a lot of value back to others and our services and whatnot. So you have questions, whatnot, fill them into the survey. We greatly appreciate your time and look forward to future conversations. So thank you all for your time and enjoy your day.